Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FBC Radio Live. It's Friday, September the 19th, and week two is in the books, John. We had a pair of Monday night games, and, well, they were games. They were entertaining. There were certainly some interesting fumble sequences. Uh, Something we don't necessarily. It was entertaining from a almost like a football follies type standpoint. I don't know. That was it was interesting, to say the least. The Browns didn't look good. Deshaun Watson. Hey, who was on Deshaun Watson not being a great quarterback a long time ago, John?
Well, you were and remain so, but you're also the quarterback whisperer.
Yes.
You don't throw that word around great quarterback or that phrase great quarterback around lightly, right? So,
No.
and I give you credit for that. So you're kind of a quarterback snob. There's like Brady.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's Brady, and then there's Brady and Mahomes and Rodgers.
Begrudgingly, I have to include those other guys.
You gotta have a couple guys in there. There's got to be a silver medalist and a bronze medal winner as well somewhere along the line. But you don't throw that term around. I mean, Matt Stafford won a Super Bowl, and everybody's like, well, he's definitely a Hall of Famer. And you push back against that because, first of all, let's see what the guy does for the rest of his career. And just because you win a Super Bowl doesn't make you a Hall of Famer. Joe Flacco, heck, Jim Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Probably will never get there. So, everybody gets anointed great. The 12th best quarterback is great, according to a lot of people, and that's just not the case. Right now, I think you can make a case there's one great quarterback playing, and that's Patrick Mahomes. 2 Super Bowls, 2 league MVPs. These other guys are still trying to find their way. They're all very young, promising, but let's not call them great quite yet.
Yeah, and that's really kind of kind of my motivation, and more so, I guess maybe it's pushed back towards the positive coverage we get, and maybe you can call me a Grinch all you want about it, or whatever, Scrooge McDuck.
Curmudgeon.
Yeah, curmudgeon. That's I like using that word. I should have thought of that, but. The reality of it is, though, it's a lot of it's hype. We were talking about this a little bit off the air. Like, I mean, we fell for it. I mean, I was big hype on Justin Herbert, and so far he looks like Dante Culpepper. Which, okay, it's not a great, it's not a terrible guy. I mean, he had a cannon in an arm. He had some nice moments in this league, but he wasn't a great quarterback, and that's fine. Not every quarterback has to be great just because they look cool throwing the football. And look, some of this logic in a way does apply to Mahomes because I think his greatness has been if I say over exaggerated, then I get ripped because it's like, oh my God, you're hating on Mahomes. No. But if you're calling him a top 3 quarterback of all time, yes, you're quote unquote overrating him and kind of pushing an agenda that just isn't accurate right now. And that's kind of true across the board. So you get a lot of quarterbacks that have moments where it's like, oh my God, he's great. And we'll rewind and come back to Deshaun Watson because my biggest issue was, and I've said this for a long time before he was traded to the Browns, before when he was still on the Texans. So this isn't just the beginning of the season thing. This isn't after we've seen him for the last handful of games that he's played. I was not impressed with his 5,000-yard stat compilation season. And the reason I say that was the Texans went 4-12. And when 5,000 yards is impressive, yes, but I'm not impressed when your team doesn't win games because to me that tells me it's more of a product of your situation, meaning, well, you're constantly playing from behind and well, you need to throw the ball and you need to compile these stats. Doesn't mean you're doing it in the right way. So how good of a quarterback are you if you're going 4-12 in a season? I don't care what's around you, John. If you're an elite quarterback, if you're a great quarterback, I can't believe I'm saying this, John, but you remember there was a time where Deshaun Watson was loosely compared to Tom Brady because of how he could calmly navigate the pocket and everything like that. That's what I'm talking about. It gets ridiculous, and then we start calling him great, and then the Browns believe it because they go out and shell out $260 million guaranteed. And that looks like, I mean, again, if there weren't 6 other awful quarterback contracts out there, I think we'd be railing on this one a little bit more. We're still railing on it, of course, but there's a few contracts out there that at this moment don't look too good, John.
Yeah, Russell Wilson's contract doesn't look all that good. I still think Burrow and Herbert will be just fine because they're going to be their respective team's quarterback for the next decade, provided they remain healthy. I feel confident with those guys.
Let me say real quick, I'm not quite that confident anymore because we talked about the appendectomy and look, that's it happens. That's a not a football related thing, but Joe Burrow has been injured every season he's been in the league in the NFL. He's had great moments where it looks like, man, this guy is Joe Cool, but aren't those moments seem to be now narrowing down to just that Super Bowl run season, or mostly, not all, but mostly, John.
Well, I thought he was outstanding last year when they were 12-4, and he was an MVP candidate. I thought he was sensational last year, and he's only played 3 years in the league. The first year, his knee got blown up, midway through the season, and he missed the second half of the season. But the appendectomy came at the beginning of year 3, and again, that's not a football thing. So I think the next 2 years, the Super Bowl season, and then the next season when he loses the AFC Championship game by 3 points, I think he was outstanding both of those years. Off to a really poor start this year. I get that. Now you got the cap strain to deal with, which concerns me because it also could affect his Achilles. I mean, we've heard about Aaron Rodgers' cap strain in training camp or OTAs, and same leg, and then the Achilles snaps on opening night. So yeah, I mean, again, he's not the youngest of 4-year quarterbacks because he came in the league a little older. But like Trevor Lawrence is 23, and Josh Allen is 26, and Burrow's 26. So I mean, give them a little time to become great, because I don't want to throw that word around, but also give them time to kind of bloom their career.
Well, I mean, again, maybe I am a little bit of a harsh grader, and
thank God I didn't have you in English.
No,
English professor or whatever, or science. Actually, science was the subject I hated the most. I just wasn't interested in it.
Yeah, it would. I guess it depended, what the subject was for me. I guess. I don't know. I guess my recollection. It's a little bit skewed now because I feel like now I would love all that stuff. I'd be a huge nerd, nerd,
yeah.
like bookworm, that whole thing.
Yep.
And I kind of wish I was, because hey, it is what it is. You grow up, you mature, you learn, do all that stuff. Except for Deshaun Watson, who apparently is still a little bit grabby, but this time with the officials. Anyways. Yeah, I don't know. Going back to my agenda and our conversation about Joe Burrow, I'm like not completely dismissing it, John. I'm just saying that I think we're just too quick to jump on yes, he's great, and then he's played with some great talent around him since the moment he got in the league. And again, maybe this is I watched Tom Brady do the opposite. He got those talented players after he had done something in this league, and especially in this very, very offensive friendly league, John, it's hard for me to give a baseline judgment on how great a quarterback is when they don't have inferior talent around him. Because
we'll never know about Peyton Manning, because from the day he walked into the league, he had Marvin Harrison, then Richie Wayne, and Falk early in his career, and then Edgerrin James. So he had Hall of Famers around him
but
much his entire career.
But he also did it for 15, 16, 17 years.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But John, I'm not completely dismissing what you're saying. I don't it the first few years, and you actually brought it up earlier, was Peyton Manning had doubt. Yeah, people doubted Peyton Manning after the first few years because he wasn't winning. I mean, I think you could maybe in hindsight look back and say, oh, okay, yes, he had talent. You could see it there, and you could see it blossom. But I'm talking about more so in this era of football, because to Peyton's credit, he was drafted in 1998. You know what I mean? It was a little. But also to his discredit, it was his team that really pushed for those rule changes post 2004. So again, that's the criticism though of Peyton Manning, especially when you're trying to compare him to a guy like Tom Brady. You're like, well, Peyton, you talk about Brady's quote unquote defensive advantages, which, again, it's kind of silly logic when you're comparing to quarterbacks' abilities. It's why go to the, compare one player's defense when you're talking about the player's ability. But that's not the argument. But the argument would be, well, Peyton Manning had better players around him. So is Joe Burrow going to be great? He could be. He could be, John. But if his career is a Super Bowl appearance and seasons where he has good numbers, then I mean I'm going to have to wait until his career's over and kind of put that all into perspective, because at that point, to me, he's just a good quarterback, not a great one. And I think throwing the word great around and elite and all this stuff, it may be appropriate relative to his competition in the league currently, but in terms of all time and historically, you're right. There's really not that any great quarterbacks in this league aside from like Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers is injured, and look, he has his flaws too. So I don't know, John. Maybe I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today.
Yeah, I think you did, man.
Well, you look.
Well, the only thing I'll say about this is it is all relative. So elite to me always felt like 8, like because obviously March Madness elite 8, so top 8 quarterbacks. But in a given period of time, the 8th best quarterback in the league can be a borderline Hall of Famer, and at a different time, the 8th best quarterback in the league could be just a guy, right? So that's obviously have to be factored in, obviously. But these guys are still so young, and he's had early success. Burrow, again, he's only played 3 years. And to do it with Cincinnati, and I know he has good talent around him, but that kind of helps a little bit that the guy was picked first and didn't say trade me like Eli Manning said, or maybe we're going to see that with Caleb Williams if the wrong team has the number 1 overall pick and he decides to stay at USC and make plenty of money with NIL. But Burrow said no, I'm going to Cincinnati. I'm going to turn things around, and he kind of did. So I think you give him some credit for that, going to essentially a loser organization, whereas Mahomes had a really nice situation. That the first year was going with Andy Reid, a team that had made the playoffs 4 out of the previous 5 years. So he went to a better situation. So maybe that's how we're looking at it with Burrow, that he's at least been able to elevate the organization.
And look, I mean, and who knows how this season's going to play out, John. It hasn't been the best start individually for Patrick Mahomes. So perhaps you get a 60% Travis Kelce. We talked about it yesterday. Maybe he is starting to show signs of his age. We don't know. It could be injury related. It could be age related. Maybe it was just it's an overreaction to, that's why we did it during our Monday overreactions. Maybe it's an overreaction to one game, but maybe he does take a step back, Travis Kelce, and all of a sudden, Patrick Mahomes doesn't have that arsenal of weapons, and say he struggles. Guess what? Doubts are going to creep in too, because again, it's hard when the base, like, look, he has a lot going for him, so it's not as simple as just his stats taking a step back. Obviously, like I said, if Justin Herbert, just again, he hasn't won Super Bowls, so it's like if Patrick Mahomes has a down relative to what he's used to statistical season, it's not going to create a lot of doubts. But if he struggles mightily throughout this season, John, then it's I think it's fair to raise questions, because, well, this is the first season you're really not in that ideal situation with really great talent around you. So how do you perform? Well, if you take a massive step back, yeah, guess what? I'm gonna question your greatness, because fair or not, John, if you want to continue to bring, especially in the Mahomes case, bring Brady into the mix, well, guess what? He's going to be the baseline. And we know that he can win with great players, and again, this isn't an insult to Troy Brown, but I mean, let's face it, John, offensive skill players were not the priority for the Patriots early on. They just weren't. And a lot was relied upon Brady. And you kind of see that now, where it's like, yeah, I think you have better skill players than you had in 2001 currently. But the Patriots, I think, are, and this is unfair to Mac Jones because he's not Tom Brady. The Patriots are trying to rely too much on pretty good weapons when this league is so predicated on having skill players at the wide receiver position, or, ultimate skill players like Christian McCaffrey at running back. So, I don't know. I think we're just in such a weird place analytically because of the boom offensively, the constant changing of rules that favor the offense, to where we have no real legitimate comparison to what the greatness we've seen before, because again, these numbers are out of whack. Justin Herbert has more passing yards in his first 3 seasons than anyone but Patrick Mahomes. And guess what? That does not make him the second greatest quarterback of all time. But unfortunately, I'm not saying people say that, but people value that quite a bit when we don't really know how much we should value it. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, and I don't even know if it relates to winning. I mean, look, Mac Jones has thrown 98 passes this year. That's not a good thing for the Patriots. That means they're behind, which they've been in the first 2 games. You know, they're down 16-0 in the first quarter of Game 1 against the Eagles, 17-3 at halftime in Game 2 against the Dolphins. So he's throwing the football on average 49 times per game, which is absurd. He should be throwing the ball 30 times a game, have more balance with the running game. He's averaging 6 yards per attempt, which is god awful. So, you know, yeah, in the end, you say, oh, wow, Mac was thrown for 570 yards or whatever. He's on pace to throw for 5,000 yards. Well, whoop-de-doo. If they go 4-13, what good is that? So, yeah, no, it's a different time. So, obviously, the stats are inflated without question. The game has changed a lot over the last 10 and 20 years. So, everyone has to adapt to that. I think defenses are kind of catching up a little bit, you know, because we're seeing more and more of these impactful players on defense like we saw last night, right? Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt. These guys just blow up games. Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa. I mean, I just think of those 4 guys as like, good luck trying to block them. They must just give every offensive coordinator nightmares getting ready for their game. So, yeah, I think they're starting to catch up a little bit. Just the athleticism on defense is getting better and better and better. It's also getting better on offense. But I think, you know, I think so far, and I agree with you wholeheartedly when you brought this up yesterday, like we saw 4 quarterbacks play last night. They all kind of stunk.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, none of them were really good. I mean, 2 of them did win games, but, you know, Kenny Pickett can't take any credit for the Steelers winning. That was the defense of T.J. Watt. And Derek Carr won a game, but he wasn't very good either. I mean, we saw 4 quarterbacks essentially not play well last night. And we saw a lot of that on Sunday. It's just, maybe it's kind of a correction right now where the defenses are catching up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, we'll see. You know, this is something that's more appropriate to be looked at in the long term. You know, we're reacting week to week, so you know, 6 weeks from now, we could, you know, look at it a little bit differently and say, you know what, maybe it was a little bit of an overreaction. But no, like I said, I just, you know, I look at it and it's like maybe it's again, maybe it's me adjusting to life without Brady, and in an extension, life without Brady, Manning, you know, those guys, because that era was truly, I think, a great era of quarterback play. I mean, you had some really, I mean, again, Manning and Brady tend to fall, if anything, on everyone's top 5 list of all-time great quarterbacks, and you had them concurrently for 90% of each other's career. Well, maybe not 90% of Brady's career because, well, he played so goddamn long, but you know what I mean? Like it's just it's something that I think we took for granted, in the sense that, like, yeah, the fans of teams not the Colts and Patriots / Bucks or Broncos got tired of it. But from a historically great football sense, you know, it was a great era. Just like, you know, when you had guys like Montana, Marino, and Elway all playing at the same. I mean, we're talking about historically great quarterbacks. We're not just talking about great quarterbacks relative to their competition, you know. So, and I think
we're both just very angry because Brady retired and Rodgers is out for the year. So I think that sums up our feelings going forward. Like,
so it was just two old guys yelling at clouds.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We could have just saved 20 minutes by telling our listeners that we're just 2 old guys yelling at clouds and whatever. But
I like listening to you. That's okay.
Okay, that's good. I've had a lot of caffeine, so I'm kind of feel like I'm rolling right now. But
there you go.
Pets' heads are falling off, all that stuff. But anyways, we have obviously the end of week 2, so naturally we're going to take a look at, you know, our 2-0 teams, because, you know, that's what you do, you know. You look at 2-0 teams, which one's impressed, which one's surprising you, all that stuff. And look, I mean, I think, you know, obviously the most dominant ones, Cowboys and 49ers. Right now, it looks like we're you know, turning back the clock a bit and going to the 80s and 90s, and you know, reigniting that rivalry a bit, which would be great. Which would be great because through 2 weeks, John, they clearly look like the two best teams in the league, right? I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Oh yeah, I mean they have arguably the two best defenses, and they got plenty of weapons on offense. They hit the road running to start the season. Philadelphia is also 2-0, but they haven't looked overly impressive. But hey, they banked 2 wins in the early going, which is impressive. Yeah, I think those are the 3 best teams in the NFC. And amazingly, Ian, there's 7 teams in the NFC with 2-0 records. There's only 2 in the AFC with 2-0 records, Baltimore and Miami. And also in terms of interconference play, the NFC is up 6-0. And all we talked about all offseason was how strong the AFC is and all these great quarterbacks. And as we've just talked about for the last 20 minutes, maybe those great quarterbacks aren't quite great yet. And that the NFCs maybe have more balanced teams, right? Like San Francisco and Dallas have full-fledged rosters where they can beat you in multiple ways, maybe not so reliant on the quarterback.
Yeah, and I'll note that somewhat in a hysterical fashion, the NFC South has 3 2-0 teams, which I would have never guessed it.
Yeah.
And to the greatness thing, and maybe this, I don't know if this is going to muddy my opinion even more, but it's about quarterbacks that can make a consistent difference. Like Justin Herbert shows greatness, but has he ever individually elevated his team to a victory?
I mean, I'm sure this is now his 4th year. He probably has. I don't come to mind real quickly, but just looking at the first 2 weeks of the season, he had opportunities to beat Miami. They were down 2. He had the ball with a minute 45 left.
That's the difference. Field goal
to win. He wasn't able to come through in that situation, and then he loses in overtime to, kind of a middling Tennessee team. Had the ball with a chance in regulation to lead his team down the field for the game-winning field goal, and he wasn't able to do that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to cut him a little slack also because we both agree that he's probably playing for the worst coach in the NFL, and Brandon Staley.
Oh, sure.
I think Kellen Moore is a good offensive coordinator. Is Staley going to even last the entire year? Probably so, because the Chargers are notoriously cheap, although they did give Herbert the big contract, which they almost had to, right? I mean, if you're going to be in business, you got to have a quarterback that at least we think is going to be good, or upper level quarterback. I'm not going to call him a lead or great or anything like that, but still, you figure you have your quarterback for the next decade. So maybe you cut him a little slack as a Brandon Staley, who, if they do things a little differently earlier in the game, maybe they're not in position to be tied late. Maybe they're up a field goal or a touchdown. So yeah, no, but there aren't many moments where I felt that Herbert took the team and dragged it across the finish line for a victory. I mean, again, we've got to stop comparing quarterback to Tom Brady. Like this, they just did it for 20 years. It's not fair. It's like comparing actors to Daniel Day-Lewis or, whatever. So, but even other quarterbacks we've seen will their team to victory. Even guys like Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr had plenty of come from behind or last minute wins. You got to see more of that from Justin Herbert.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean that might come in time, and like I said, but we're harsh graders here, and look, I'd rather be a harsh grader than just be like, oh, everyone's great and everyone's awesome, because that's what leads to the Hall of Pretty Good, not Hall of Fame. So, but yeah, anyway, so we have a handful of 2-0 teams. Like I said, surprisingly, 3 of them in the NFC South with the Falcons, the Saints obviously moving to 2-0 last night, and then the Buccaneers, who are sitting at 2-0, and the Panthers at 0-2. So, look, obviously, like I said, 49ers, Cowboys, quite a impressive start for the 2 of them. The Ravens have quietly, I think, just taking care of business. I mean, we haven't had those, big, I guess, highlight moments from Lamar Jackson, but he's been playing very, very good football. He's my MVP pick this year, so I hope he continues to play good football. And then the Dolphins, who, I'm having such a tough time, John, hammering down who the Dolphins are. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think that they may be the best team in the AFC East. I'm not pushing that aside. They may be one of the better teams in the AFC. I just don't. I'm not ready to commit one way or the other, John. I can't do it. Because it's like in one instance, I see their defense just allow all that scoring to the Chargers, and then at times, do we believe that the Patriots are a good team or not? Because at times they were competing with the Dolphins, and if the Patriots are a bad team and the Dolphins are playing down to you know what I'm saying? So I don't know if the Dolphins are 2-0 great. I don't know. Like I know the 49ers are great. Okay? There's even some question about the Cowboys because again, how many times are we going to see, oh, what a great start by the Cowboys. This is finally their year. Version 30, that's pretty much what we're doing right now. So to me, I'm like, okay, the 49ers are great. I know they're great. I don't need to see much more out of them to realize that they're great. The Dolphins, I don't know. I'm on the fence, and I'm not leaning one way or the other. I'm not doubting, their two victories one way or the other. I'm just saying, like, I can't put a finger on them. Can you?
Well, the thing is, you get a question: is Tua going to remain healthy for the season? Look, that's every quarterback, but he does have a history of concussions, which is problematic for sure. Their offensive line, I think, is good, not great. So, maybe that's connected to worrying about Tua's health. Defensively, they traded for Jalen Ramsey. He may not play till December, so that is, a factor. Their defense, I think, is okay. Vic Fangio is a top-flight defensive coordinator, so he'll get the most out of that unit. But, offensively, they do create a lot of problems with all that speed out there when you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And Tua seems to be on point. He's so accurate. And Mike McDaniel obviously is a very good offensive coach. So, but yeah, I'm not ready to anoint them champions of the AFC East and that they're going to go on and be the 1 or 2 seed. And
difficult
to knock them out.
Not even that. I just don't know in general because it's only been 2 weeks. See, like I said, there's certain things I'm more comfortable jumping the gun and kind of making like I said, the 49ers, I know they're great. We've seen how great they've been over the last handful of years. After 2 weeks, the Dolphins are certainly on the right track. I'll say that. But at the same time, like I said, some people think the Patriots stink. I still think they're a pretty good team that maybe it's just a couple tweaks here and there that's gonna figure things out. And maybe I don't know, John. And again, I'm hoping that I'm just not like hanging on to a little bit of hope here. But I don't know if they're a great team or not. So if the Dolphins play down to the Patriots, well, how impressive was that victory anyways? Because you can argue that the Patriots kind of shot themselves in the foot and kind of almost lost that game themselves with some pretty just mind-boggling decisions and play at times. So again, if that's the case, well, maybe Miami isn't that great and they're just a very good offensive team and a mediocre defensive team. I don't know. So, but I will give them credit though, because again, I do believe they're going to be a really good team, and my gut's telling me that. But then again, that's not a good thing, John. That's not necessarily a good thing because, I'm on a bad run of making predictions. It's kind of concerning. I'm not going to lie. So maybe my confidence, my misplaced confidence, my confidence will be misplaced in the Dolphins here. So I don't know. But either way, I think the 49ers and the Cowboys are obviously the two dominant 2-0 teams. But you got to like what you've seen from the other ones so far. I mean, again, surprising that the Bucs are 2-0. Yeah. I mean, I didn't peg them to win too many games this year. So we'll see. Like I said, I mean, there's going to be moments where, Baker struggles. I mean, it's who he is. That's why he's not a great quarterback. He's a pretty good quarterback, no doubt about it, but he's not great. And I think that's we're going to see that at some point, John. But you can't help but be kind of surprised that they're 2-0 right now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they'd be in the running for the first overall pick and Caleb Williams or whatever the great young quarterbacks that are going to be available in next year's draft, and they've surprised me. I thought the Bears would upset them last week, but the Bears can't get out of their own way. Give Tampa credit for being 2-0. Maybe Baker Mayfield's in a position now he's kind of flying under the radar. We don't see all of those commercials, and he's just kind of concentrating on football and doing a nice job. They do have some nice weapons there. You got Mike Evans as your primary receiver. That's a good start.
Well, and I think the biggest change and the most notable change so far is at the offensive coordinator position.
Yeah.
And, go and replay any post Sunday or Monday night last season where the Bucs played, and you could sit here and just, listen to us rail, especially me, about the just god awful play calling. And just through 2 weeks watching this team, it's night and day. It's like, oh my God, creativity. They're adjusting, and I think this was obviously the frustrating thing about watching the Buccaneers last year, because it felt like they kind of lost an opportunity, because even if Brady wasn't his physical or mental self because of all the other things going on off the field, um, they still had an opportunity to win a lot more than they did last year. And I thought they were hampered by really poor offensive game planning by, well, again, I'm going to put the blame on Byron Leftwich, because that's the difference right now. So very, very surprising, but that's been the most impressive thing, is just how they've gone about adjusting offensively and kind of reinventing themselves a bit. And I'm happy for them, because again, I live down here, so it's like I have a lot of friends that are Bucks fans, so it's like, I'm good for them, but like I'm kind of like, man, I wish they would have just done this last year, because I think it doesn't mean that they were going to win the Super Bowl last year, but I think you would have been better than 8-9 certainly, and maybe been had a little bit more successful of a postseason run, and what ultimately was Brady's last postseason run. So surprising for sure for the Bucks.
Yeah, 3 teams in the South, like you said, 3-0. We kind of figured that was one of the worst divisions in football. New Orleans does have a really good defense, so if the offense doesn't screw up all that much, they're going to be in games. I'm high on Atlanta. I picked them to win the division. They got a lot of offensive weapons, some speed on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, these divisions and even the conferences have a way of swaying back and forth, where, going into the season, we're like, geez, 8 of the top 10 teams in football are in the AFC, and 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks are in the AFC. And it's like, hold on a second. The NFC is not that bad. Again, 6-0 in interconference play so far.
Well, it used to be easy when you had Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in the AFC, because you were just like, all right, well, the AFC is that's it. That's what it's going through. One of those 2 quarterbacks is a 90-some-odd% chance that they're going to be the ones representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. So, and then Flacco.
And Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah. Roethlisberger, Manning, and Brady were for 15 years. I think they 13 Super Bowls.
16. I mean, well, when you figure it out that Brady went to 9, Manning went to 4.
Well, I'm saying like in a stretch, there was a stretch where.
Yeah, it was like every year. It was one of those guys without question. And yeah, like you said, Flacco kind of broke up the party in 2012. Right. Yeah, they were always there. It was one of those guys going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah. So we'll see. But anyways, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back on Thursday. We're going to kind of start getting geared up towards week 3 and talk about that. And have some more fun then. So maybe I'll be in a better mood then. Maybe I'll be more, positive about quarterback play in the NFL in 2023. I doubt it, but maybe. You never know. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk to you then.